Why do some make it and others don't? Whew. Even at best, man, if someone checks all the boxes, talented, personable, easy to get along with, attractive, all the things, right? Even with every box checked, it's still a chance, it's still a bet. Movement is not the same thing as progress. But this is not the same thing as this.
Derek Wells is one of the most sought-after session guitarists in the music business. He's won many awards and worked on albums with Thomas Rhett, Katy Perry, Carrie Underwood, Florida Georgia Line, Marren Morris, Tim McGraw, Dan and Shay, Morgan Wallen, Patti Smith, Blake Shelton, Dolly Parton, Shakira, Rascal Flatts, and many more. In his words, all he ever wanted to do was be good enough to play for the Yankees. And when he finally got there, all his heroes were still on the team. The dream, he says, is alive, but he's quick to add, it depends on your definition of the dream. Derek is a completely no-nonsense guy. He answers anything you ask him with ruthless sincerity and a modesty unbefitting his accomplishments and talent. Nashville is his hometown, and the city seems to have soaked into his marrow. As Derek says, all he really cares about, at the end of the day, is making a living with his guitar.
Derek Wells, Nashville native, started out as a guitar player. I think when most people ask me, what do you do? That's still my kind of default, even though it's maybe evolved into a little bit of a broader answer. But
most sought after, just because you won't say it, seems like the most sought after session guitarist in town. That's what people are telling me.
It's been a good run.
Yeah.
It's been a good run. And yeah, but kind of started in the touring world, made the decision to bail on the touring thing to focus on recording, just kind of more of a passion for me. Did that, and then that has kind of the successes there kind of led into other collaborative endeavors where, now I'm a producer for records. I have a joint venture with a publishing company here, and I help develop songwriters and talent. All things music related. I really just kind of view myself as a collaborator more than anything.
So you started with a passion for guitar?
Guitar is where it started, absolutely. I went to college briefly. So my parents are, let's go way back. My parents are in the music business. They're both what you would, kind of classify as, sidemen musicians, right? And played in bands, played for successful artists. And I think there's a combination of for me, a kid, it's like what your parents do is just not cool. It wasn't cool to me. I had no interest in it, no desire to be in it, to work in it, didn't care to play music. I was kind of into athletics as a young adult. So it wasn't really until kind of my late teens, and then ultimately when I went to college and I wasn't playing sports anymore, I kind of suddenly had all this free time, typical freshman schedule at college. If you've been, you kind of get those 8 a.m. classes, and you'd be done by 11 every day, and just kind of twiddling my thumbs. And that's where, I remember coming home one weekend and asking my dad, hey, do you have a guitar I could take up, with me to college you wouldn't mind missing for a little while? And he was like, yeah, I can take this one. And that's where kind of really the hook set in. I just kind of remember a lot of hours in my dorm room there. I'd kind of rigged up a makeshift situation where I could, kind of plug into my laptop in here. This is way before we had really cool, easy software tools to do that sort of thing. It was a, bizarre series of RCA connectors that I had patchworked into this situation. And, after kind of a few months of that and realizing I wasn't loving college, I really like this. I don't get tired of doing this. I really enjoy this. This excites me. I had a very, very real understanding of where the bar was here in this town. And so, first year and a half, once I'd kind of pivoted and was just kind of, living in a basement and practicing guitar, I waited tables. I didn't even tell people I played guitar. I wasn't trying to go throw myself out there and get work, because I knew I wasn't good enough. I was going to embarrass myself. So it was that kind of turned into my college, right? It was I would wait tables every day, and if I didn't have a shift or whatever, I would, be practicing, and I'd spent all my money, kind of buying equipment, and I was able to live really, really cheap at the time, and
Just got better.
Yeah, just you put in it's the woodshed, right? That was probably my, the 10,000 hours period or whatever they call it.
But you had to have some kind of gift, because now you're this virtuoso who's sought after, and how'd you go from you picking up a guitar, you don't know if you're going to be good enough to play in a bar, too.
Well, I say two things. I tell people commonly, genetics helped me close the gap, right? There was obviously some predisposition there, which is really helpful. But the thing it really takes, I believe, to get good at anything, because a lot of people are born talented. A lot of people are born naturally with my wife's a school teacher. She has a beautiful singing voice. She has a really great ear for melody and pitch and all those kinds of things. She doesn't use any of it. What it really takes beyond being born with some kind of natural aptitude or, predisposition for it is just that weird switch in your mind where you never get sick of doing it, where you can just go, and that's what I had, especially at that time in my life. Just this hunger for it, just playing and playing and playing and playing and playing all day and all night, and all the skin coming off my fingers, and just playing and playing. And I had a little boom box that I would use, and the rewind button had been worn completely off from the CDs, from me just rewinding sections and trying to learn them by ear, and just the whole thing. And so that's really what what gets you there. And I think anything else, right? Like, you can be...
Obsession.
That's probably a fair way to say it.
Talent and obsession together.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, at least that was my path to it. It was definitely not a balanced period in my life. There was nothing else. I didn't have a girlfriend. I wasn't hanging out with friends, like nothing.
Just going.
That hardcore, 18 months. And then still, once I kind of started working, again, very real understanding of where the bar was. Even after I was kind of doing some work and getting paid to play guitar, I still realized where I stood in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. So you said that a lot of people have talent. I mean, I think that's so incredibly true. You meet people all the time in all these different fields that either we work in or that we bring in for videos, and I can't believe how talented they are. Comedians or musicians or actors or whatever, and there's no way to know how they're going to fare in their careers, and especially being in Nashville, you hear people sing at these places that are like, I was at the Pick and Parlor in Franklin the other night.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness. And then the Canary the other night, and a young guy came out, and people who don't know, and I obviously can't tell very well, I'm sure you would be able to tell things that I couldn't, but it's mind-blowing that these guys aren't superstars. So what's the relationship between talent and recognition, talent, fame?
Whew. Yeah, you're asking about, why do some make it and others don't, or maybe why they haven't yet, right? Which is tough. And there's been a lot of things thrown out over the years, words like X Factor and all that kind of stuff, right? And I think the most honest answer and the realest answer is, who knows? But what I can tell you is that specifically in a town like Nashville, where the depth chart is so deep and the bar is so high, that being good is just an understood part of the job, right? It's not even like, well, they're amazing, things should be happening for them. It's like, well, man, everyone here is amazing. My joke is, throw a rock over your shoulder and you'll hit a great guitar player here in Nashville. It's the same with singers and writers, artists, all of this stuff, whether you're drummer, everyone here was the best musician in whatever town they came from, right? Their people and their peers and their friends were like, man, he's got it, he should go to Nashville, or she should go to Nashville, and they did, right? And then they got here and they realized they're in the deep end of the pool, right?
Talent's just a prerequisite.
Talent's a prerequisite,
Yeah.
right? And then from there, I used to have an old sports coach, and he had this thing that he said, I don't know if somebody said it before him or what, but he used to say that the definition of luck is when preparation meets opportunity, right? And man, that really is it. So when we talk about people getting their breaks here, or I can say it for me, I remember some of those moments for me in my career when the really special things happened. We happened to get presented with an opportunity. We were prepared to meet the moment, right? And you came out the other side in a better position than you were.
Right.
And of course, this is all assuming that, you know, there aren't some other, you know, personality flaws or self-destructive tendencies or whatever thing. But yeah, like even
tends to be common to the creative trait. Yeah.
Right. So like even at best, man, if someone checks all the boxes, you go talented, personable, you know, easy to get along with, attractive, you know, whatever, all the things, right? Even with every box checked, it's still a chance.
Yeah.
It's still a bet, right? Nothing's a lock. It's still, there's this kind of, these stars have to kind of align moment. And I would say also too, particularly in this music industry where it's a lot of kind of what have you done lately, that has to happen 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 your career. Yeah. You know, you have to kind of maintain that trajectory and, you know, go through the periods where you feel like you've been kind of shot out of a rocket ship and things are really happening, and then it'll ebb and flow and you kind of go through the valley and wait for the next time you get shot out of a rocket, hopefully, or maybe that was the one time.
And how much of that is blind chance and how much of it is agency? How much of it can you go out and kind of seek these opportunities and do your own bidding? And, you know, it seems to me like you have an unbelievable music career, and yet you also seem like you do 50 other things involving production and business and talent and you know, maybe you could talk about some of the special moments that you mentioned and what you think, where you think those came from and how much of a role you played in grabbing onto them.
Sure. You know, any of those moments for me, I can trace back pretty clearly to some, you know, to some degree, and you know, without getting too involved in any of the stories, you know, the very first time I kind of got a job touring, playing guitar for a major label artist was a chance meeting because I was playing guitar for a songwriter friend of mine, and the guy that happened to be at the show came up to me and said, "Hey man, I've got a gig I can't do in a few days. I've called every sub I know. No one can do it. I know you don't know me, but are you available? Would you want to do it?" Just complete chance, right? So that happened, right? I prepared. I went and did that job, and it worked out for me, right? And then, you know, XYZ opportunities kind of came from that, right? People doing that. The exact same thing happened for my session career, where when I had, you know, kind of in the beginning of trying to put myself out there and kind of actively just tell peers and other, you know, people my age or people that I thought might be well connected, like, hey, I really like to be playing sessions. I'm passionate about it, and you know, I'm touring right now and I do this, but when I'm home, I really like to be playing. And another just chance encounter with a songwriter that hired me to play a live show, took a liking to me. You know, a few months later said, "Hey, I'm changing publishing deals. I'm thinking about changing up my studio band. Do you want to do a demo session for me?" You know, this absolutely. From that moment, you know, you can talk about XYZ opportunities that presented themselves outside of that, right? And the roots just kind of grow and grow and grow, and you walk through this door and you walk through this door. And then ultimately that, you know, years of that and kind of proving myself as a collaborator and in the recording field led to somebody going, "Man, do you ever produce? You know, do you ever produce anything? 'Cause, you know, I like your ideas and this, you know," kind of going, "Well, no, I never have, but I'd be willing to," and kind of walking through that door, and then things evolve from there. And then the same thing, like with this, you know, the fact that I, you know, have an interest in publishing at this point just purely stemmed from, you know, I have such a respect for the songwriting community here in Nashville. So many of my dearest friends were songwriters. And, you know, a guy who had kind of been a mentor to me and a successful work partner presented this thing to me and said, "Hey man, I just feel like this can be a great way for us to work more closely together, and are you even interested? Would you even consider it?" And again, it's kind of always just been these moments of there's an opportunity, you prove yourself. When you walk through that door, you're kind of introduced to a new set of people, and then the opportunities from those sets of people proliferate. Yeah, proliferate, great word.
How do you segment these things in your mind? So you're producing and publishing over here, and then you've been part of I think it's like, I don't know, 50 or 60 #1 songs
Sure.
or something like that, something
Sure.
crazy, right?
Yeah,
And
sure.
so everyone from Dolly Parton to
Yeah.
Marren Morris
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the whole roster of celebrity musicians. And what does it feel like? Is it all just music work to you? Is it all music business to you? Or is it some of it like, you use your soul over here and your business acumen over here? I mean, how does that break down?
There definitely has to be dividers up for me. If for no other reason, I want my collaborators in the moment to know that I'm fully there, right? So, what I don't want to do is be on session for Marren and kind of like taking phone calls in the hall about, publishing endeavors and, or hey, have you heard these songs? Trying to make her hear songs and those kinds of things. It's like Marren has asked me in that moment, Marren or Carrie or whoever it is, right, has asked me to come in and collaborate as a musician in that form and in that purpose. Another thing I'm very wary of on the days when I'm playing guitar is that I'm not the producer that day, and I certainly don't want to overstep any boundaries with the guy doing that job that day, right? And bluntly, if I've taken the gig, I have respect and I want to be there. I was fortunate, long ago I was able to kind of quit taking the things I don't want to take. So if I'm there to be there. I'm happy to be there. I have respect and admiration for those people, and I want to work and I want to help. And even if it's a young producer, even if it's someone that hasn't, because I've definitely been in that situation where well, I've produced X amount of #1s and I've played on X amount of #1s and I'm working for this guy. He's done none of those things, or she has done none of those things. But that doesn't matter. Like there's still a level of I said yes because I was interested in the project. Yeah. To kind of circle back to the part of like, well, what's your soul and what's your business? Well, it's all both of it, right? Because it's all very much a service industry. Right? Anytime you're collaborating, right? Because it's making music for pretty much everyone in this town is a collaborative experience. So you're not getting hired to come in and paint the roof of the Sistine Chapel by yourself and make it whatever you want, right? You're there to interact with these people and collaborative, and it's supposed to be the whole is greater than the sum of its parts scenario, right? So you're always, giving, a part of your soul to all of it. If you care to be there, you're always invested, and you want to be. But at the same time, you have to keep a tab on the emotional part of it because, it's not yours and yours only to decide how this needs to turn out ultimately, right? It's always somebody else,
In other words, is there a sense that you don't want to invest too much to avoid getting totally crushed later on?
Yeah, you just have to. It's not even totally crushed. I think you just have. I think what ultimately it boils down to is you just have to choose your battles.
Yeah.
Right. So because you can't stand up on the table and say like I think it should be this. I think it should be this, and because Carrie Underwood's going to say, okay, Derek, but it's my name on the record. Right. So you have to kind of do those, you have to be wary about those kinds of things. And you watch some people that aren't able to, they invest so hard that they aren't able to kind of control that. And it can be emotional and we love them for it, but it can also be problematic sometimes. And so I've always just tried to keep a fair balance of, if I can't invest at all and I'm going to be checked out, I'd rather just not be there.
Here's a weird question. Does it feel like a job most days?
Most days, yes. And it's a really interesting conversation too to have because I remember a time in my life when it never did. And, I can, that like kind of passionate, like waking up with just a hunger to go and create and to go to this session and to play and to interact and to it was truly what I lived for a period of life. And it's hard to put your finger on when when that part changed, you could say changed, you could say evolved, you could, say what it is, but I think at some point, you've been working to get to a place, you've been working towards something to get somewhere, and you kind of look around and think like, oh man, did I do it? I think I maybe did it. And then at that point, you for me, it was kind of like the tunnel vision goes away, and you start looking around, going, oh, okay, well, what else is there, and what can this, And I think when you start finding things and purpose and hobbies and activities outside of the thing, is when it starts to feeling a little more like work, right? Because at least for me, it was the first time in my life I would actually rather be doing something else. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about that? Are you happy that happened, or do you feel like there's some loss?
It depends on the day or the week, There's a part of me that, can objectively say that some of that change in viewpoint has made me so much better at what I do. There's a kind of a broader awareness and vision that comes when when I'm not like blinded by the bloodlust of creation, right? That you kind of can, again, objectively go back and see like, man, this is better if I do this way, and I'm better for this, and I'm more helpful if I do this, and these kinds of things, right? So on the one hand, you go, well, man, I'm thankful I've like matured. It's the Tom Brady thing, right? It's like, well, yeah, your arm may not be as strong as it was when you were, 22, and you may not like have the, quite the lust for it, but man, you know so much more about the field and kind of how to dissect things, and you probably work more efficiently and all these kinds of things, right? So that's a big part of it. But then there's days when you're driving in and you go, man, I used to be driving 85 miles an hour to get here, like, and now I'm kind of dragging my feet, and what's that about, and what does that speak to, and what does that mean, really in the broader sense. I don't have any answers.
Yeah. Well, it's just funny because you figure, 95% of the people getting off the plane to come to Nashville to kill it in the music business. If you were like, here, we'll give you this guy's career, we'll give you Derek's career, like, boom, snatch it from your hands before you could say.
That's not lost on me at all.
They would be like, that's this is wonderkind and a kingpin and all that stuff. And so I think I understand what you're saying too, because we set up goals and there's things we want to do with film and writing, and then you achieve some things, you win some awards or whatever, and all of a sudden, you can kind of pivot to the next thing. And so I think I personally transfer that hunger. Do you feel like you can live more peacefully without that gnawing sense of what are you going to get done this week?
I think so. Which is another part that has kind of changed with what I do now. Speaking to the investment, or how you're invested in things. Because when I was younger, it was definitely gun for hire, right? And it was have guitar will travel situation, and so you walked in the recording process, and you leave. Have fun with that. See it, And now, the last, several years of my career being involved much more on the back end and kind of seeing things to the finish line, so to speak, and a different part of that. And then now also on this, this publishing and developmental side, coming in on things on the very front end, right? It's like it's the startup equivalent of a young artist. It's where you see some talent there and you see a person you want to invest in, but there's a long way to go before anybody else maybe cares, and there's a lot of infrastructure to build and all those kinds of things. And so that does become a much more like around the clock kind of thing. And there's things to keep in mind and to be aware of when you're not on the clock. That's still a part of it. That certainly has gone into the change in my perspective for all of it.
Is there any thrill in that for you, the business side of it?
The thrill for me kind of comes from, and it's always been this way, it's definitely come from recognition by and from your peers. So, you know, I'm not gonna sit here and say that money doesn't matter. We all have to pay our bills, right? You know, pats on the back doesn't keep the electricity on, right? So it's not just for the love. It's obviously the way I make a living and provide for my family and all that kind of stuff. But more so than an album or a project or a song coming out and being, you know, very successful, for me, the things that I like live for and cherish and that honestly put the most in my tank is like a peer saying, hey man, just want to tell you that thing is really good, you know, or you did really good work on that. You know, I think that's
other people who are living and breathing it, recognizing it, and you,
that's always been a thing for me, and was a big reason why I shifted from the touring world to the recording world, because I just kind of realized, like, man, I'm not getting anything in my tank from, you know, this crowd of people who I don't know and, you know, don't really know me, you know, clapping or their applause. It's not really like doing anything to make me feel good about where I'm at, but, you know, the part of, I want to be around artists and peers, and in a certain sense, you know, heroes. You know, it's like, I've always said it was like, you know, I wanted to play for the Yankees. Right? And then where I was fortunate in my career is like once I was like, man, I want to play for the Yankees, I want to play for the Yankees. And then I got there and was able to play for the Yankees, and all of my heroes were still on the team, right? See, you know, for me, I got to experience that thing hugely where it was like, shit, man, I'm playing with Jeter. Like, you know, whoever, you know, the equivalent of those things musically. And those people kind of patting me on the back, you know, does a good throw, you know, that kind of stuff. That's what, that incited, especially that period in time, again, where we talked about where I was just kind of like really going hard. That was the stuff that was like, I lived every day for. I didn't care what was happening to these songs after they went out the door. I was just
experience doing it.
I was just geeking on the, you know, that's the, you know, driving a race car 200 miles an hour. That's what it felt like to me. You know, just geeking on the, you know, calling. And that's stuff I would call my parents about too. You know, it was never like, man, guess whose record I played? It was always like, you know what this drummer said to me today? He said he liked the way I was playing this. You know, that was the stuff that, you know, tripped me out insanely. So,
does entrepreneurialism come into the music business, the creative business in general, more now than it did in the past?
Of course, and that's, you know, almost directly attributed to social media, right?
What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I think like any new, I'll call them formats, like any new format, you know, I'm excited by the potential. What I do love is I love that we continue to decrease the barriers of, you know, artists and talented people kind of putting themselves out there and giving them a platform. By the same token, there's a lot of music being made people shouldn't be hearing, you know, and you wish there was maybe a little bit more of a filter on that. But, you know, I think there's so many cross sections and parallels with a lot of other things, but, you know, bluntly, I think all the social media stuff is an amazing tool for people to use, right? I think the only time it becomes, you know, dangerous to the person, or the only time, maybe dangerous isn't the word, I think the only time it hurts more than it helps is when you just get wrapped up in that one avenue, right? And we see it, you know, we see people get really caught up in the interactivity that it brings. And, you know, it's the, you know, I've watched some young artists get, you know, really wound up about, you know, the last 2 videos I've had didn't get as many likes as the one I released, you know, 3 weeks ago, and then just trying to get into the nuts and bolts of why that was and this. And you know, what I've always tried to remind people is that movement is not the same thing as progress, right? So this is not the same thing as this, right?
That's great.
And I think a lot of people, when they're looking for an opportunity or waiting for an opportunity, or they're you know, they want to be in a business, they want to be an artist, they want to be famous, they want some other life for themselves, and they're not being presented directly with any opportunities they feel like to make that happen. Well, this is a real thing that they can control, right? They can control their presence here.
So right, yeah.
They can control their presence here. They can do this thing. They can interact, and they get this kind of instant
Hit, yeah.
yeah, feedback from it, right? And they, you know, again, the danger there is like, okay, yeah, but who's the feedback coming from, and can you really trust that? We've all seen the you know, the kids on American Idol that obviously, you know, objectively cannot sing, and they leave crying, going, I know I can sing. All of my friends say I'm the best singer they've ever heard. It's like, man, your friends are either lying to you or they're idiots, you know. And that unfortunately has gotten you to the place where you thought you were going to come onto a singing competition and be competitive, right? So it's the same thing with some of that stuff. Is like, you know, man, I love all the social stuff. I love it as a tool. I love it as a platform. The people that use it well, that's great. The people that are finding a way to have a career and fund a life in the music business that maybe they couldn't otherwise have.
Right. That
Fantastic.
seems to be the best possible use of it.
That's
and
right.
And so what should they do? You know, a young person has talent. What
Yeah.
should they do? Should they go on there and try to build their own audience based on their music and collaborate where they can, or should they come to a place like Nashville and try to do it the way you would have always done it?
The artist in me would love to say that it's the latter. The realist in me knows that, you know, now, you know, even a major record label, one of the first questions they're going to ask now is, what are the numbers?
Yeah.
We love the music, we love the person, we love this.
Do you have a following?
What are the numbers? You know, what are we looking at here? And it's not solely dependent on that, but it's going to be a question that's asked,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, and you kind of said this in your question, and I think this is what's important, is what I would, you know, if I could kind of look in the eye of any young artist that's like building their social followings, it's like, this is great, but make sure it's about your music,
Yeah.
right? Because otherwise it's a reality show where you happen to sing. And for the record, if you're okay with that, that's fine too, right? But if you're telling me, you know, I mean, that can be an answer. That's fine. You can just say like, well, I just love interacting with people. I happen to sing and do music too, and it's a passion of mine, but this has been more successful. Like, that's all fine. That's all fair answers, right? But if you tell me, you're like, it's all about the music for me. This is my passion. This is my love. It's like, well then, make sure that's what the people are liking, and, you know, not picture your hat or, you know, whatever. And it's, again, fine line between kind of letting them into your world,
Yeah.
and then letting them be the testing barometer of, you know.
Your capability.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Or your proof of concept, for that matter. All these people say I'm a great singer.
Yeah.
Who are these people?
So we talked about this before when we were filming, but the idea of the dream, right? I mean, the idea that, you know, when you're growing up, and usually most people at least aren't in a town where music is the heart and soul of it, and so you're going to fashion a dream based on the idols that you see.
That's right.
And this happens in every field, as far as I can tell, every creative field.
1000%.
It happened to me with writing and with everybody we work with film and acting. And,
Yeah.
So is it a myth now? Are there too many people doing it too often, at too high a volume, at just this octane level, where the idea of someone going from an unknown to superstardom is going to be exceptionally rare, and that there's this kind of whole landscape in between where we need to be thinking more about? Or,
Yeah.
you know, what are your kind of thoughts on the dream? Is it dead or is it alive?
The dream is alive.
Okay.
But I guess it depends on, your definition of the dream.
Yeah.
Right? So, and man, you make a really great point, right? Most people can only, it's human nature, most people can only identify, you know, something that they want to be or attain or a career path because when they've seen it laid out for them, right? So yeah, we mentioned off camera, just for instance, just the idea of being a, what we call staff songwriter here in Nashville, right? So many people move to Nashville and have no idea that there's, you know, plain looking folks that some of them aren't good singers, you know, that show up every day and write songs for, you know, 6-7 hours a day and call it a day and go home. And they, you know, those songs go on to live and have homes with, you know, bigger artists and are released and, you know, really, really successful, you know, career path. And there's huge companies that invest in that and that kind of thing. You can just have a job getting paid to show up and write songs, you know. It doesn't have to be Taylor Swift in stadiums, right? And I think that's the, when I talk about like, well, what's the definition of the dream? You know, using myself as an example, it's like, man, I just want to make a living playing guitar.